Everyone is afraid of success. We are afraid of being seen. We are afraid of being judged. We are afraid that we will outgrow our friends.
Sheridan, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So, as listeners will know, the role of the nervous system and burnout have been topics that I've covered a bit recently. I'm curious how you got involved in this and if there are any controversial takes you have on the world of nervous system regulation and stress.
I think my number one controversial take lately would be, I think, that a lot of people enter into this space and all of the things that we do that are supposed to support us having more energy for life actually causing us depletion and causing us burnout. And maybe we can get into a little bit around that later on. The nervous system has become so popular in the last couple of years, but I got into it when it was still this weird thing. And honestly, I was really struggling with my mental health. I had experienced the suicide of my ex-partner. I lost a lot of my hair when I was 7 and 8 years old, and I was still struggling with the repercussions of my self-esteem on that. And I was in this foreign country and I was living there all by myself. And I had a lot of misfortune, I suppose you could call it, or I feel like I discovered a really dark side of humans, and I was diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder. And I was teaching yoga. We kind of talked about the nervous system, like that's what it was that we were doing, but it was never framed in that way, in the way that it is now. I was teaching yoga. I was not okay. I just come out of this really difficult experience. And I was also in a job in finance. And so my worlds were just not, everything felt tense. And I remember like being on my yoga mat one day and just knowing yoga is helping with this a little bit, but it's not enough. And I just started Googling things. And I was like, what is this? And I found somatic therapy and I found, mindfulness. And then everything snowballed from that moment. I started coaching, and then I started mentoring and coaching other wellness practitioners. And then that turned into burnout coaching because everyone got burnt out. And then I wrote a book, and it turned out the book was about burnout. And it's just been something that has naturally come to me.
Will you explain what somatics are for listeners?
Yeah, so soma is a word, and there's Greek history behind it. It's been used medicinally, like it's been used in yogic and Vedic texts. It just means body. It means your body. So when you see things like somatic yoga, I was just on my YouTube and I saw somatic yoga practice, and I was like, that's ridiculous. Like, it's just body-based yoga practice. So it's anything that is utilizing the intelligence or this experience of your body.
So then what is somatic intelligence in the way you frame it?
Yeah. So somatic intelligence, okay. If you think about cells, right, in a healthy environment, every cell has a function. It has a job that it does. It does that job quite well when it's supported to do that job well. And it works in conjunction with all of the other cells so that you are happy, healthy, and you feel good. You feel like you're doing what you're doing. You're healthy. Everyone is happy. Somatic intelligence is a theory, and a lot of it comes from Vedic theories of karma and purpose, and we can link that back to Christian, and it's philosophical, but it's the theory that if you're really following what your body is telling you, this is what makes me thrive, then you are doing your part for society by doing your specific function in the world, which supports everyone else doing in their function in the world, and then we can all live harmoniously.
How do you tune into your body to know what it's telling you that you need to do or it needs in order to thrive?
Well, let's start with yes and no. How do you feel yes in your body, and how do you feel no in your body, and how do you differentiate between a yes or intuition and fear. Have you ever thought about that?
Yes, because I've thought of this and I've gone through this previously. But explain, like, I think that might even be a foreign concept to a lot of people listening, is like, how do you know if your body's telling you yes or no? Especially because there's certain times where I'm sure everyone's experienced it, like a very strong visceral reaction to something, usually negative, but there's also like lesser degrees of that at the same time for like everyday decisions that aren't necessarily majorly consequential.
Yeah, and it's complicated because sometimes we think that it's a no. Like we're like, oh no, that's bad. Or do you have that friend that keeps dating the wrong people and all of their yeses are for people that are really bad for them? But as soon as you introduce them to someone who's really good for them, they're like, no, that's bad. It's hard. Like in your purest essence, your body would have a natural yes and no response that would support it. And you'll feel that. If somebody says, do you want some peanut butter or do you want a cheese toasty? You'll have a preference. You'll feel a yes or a no. What happens is that as humans, we are exposed to, you've spoken about this, we're exposed to all of these habits that take us away from our gut instinct. And our nervous system also learns about life and develops coping mechanisms based off of the pain that it's trying to avoid or the conditions that it's trying to create from since we were a kid. So when you were a kid, you might have known, I'm going to say with the relationship because it feels true today, and it's the example that I have. You might have known that that was that person over there that your family was introducing you to, that they were just not a great person. But your mom was like, you need to be polite and you need to go and give them a hug. And your body was saying no, but you learned to override that so that you could come back into society. Now, let's pull that to business or work. As an adult, your job is to unlearn those things so that you have a healthy ability to pick up, is this person actually going to be healthy for me or not? In the same way we do with food, you have to unlearn the desire to eat a lot of sugar so that you can get in contact with what your body actually needs.
And then these opportunities also, I'm sure, persist in the working world. It's not only when you're younger, but like business opportunities, and it looks really good on paper, but then you feel bad about it, or you feel something's off there, and yet perhaps we pursue it, perhaps we don't. And oftentimes with hindsight, that feeling turns out to be correct, but it's very difficult to listen to when the facts on paper look really appealing.
Yeah, and that's a larger conversation around trusting facts on paper versus trusting felt sense, and when, especially when there are other people involved, when is it appropriate to trust that, and how much trust do we give to individuals, and the responsibility of asking somebody to trust your felt sense. It's a very big responsibility. If you bring in other people into your life, you have to really do your work to know, okay, well, I've got this feeling. Is that actually, am I tapping into something bigger there, or am I just anxious? And on top of that, we've got this whole, whatever is uncertain, your body will reject. It will feel uncomfortable. So resting on the weekend, big yes for the body, but it might feel like a no at first.
I heard something recently it was like a study of a lot of the big CEOs of some of the biggest like multinational corporations on earth. And it turns out they have a disproportionately high ability to listen to their gut and make the proper decisions based on gut, given the same information as the lower performing CEOs. So it's interesting to see that plays out in the business world also. But the one pushback I'm sure we're going to hear in the comments is that like, yeah, that makes sense. But what about the mismatch between the way we are raised and the things that are in front of us from modern living? For example, you might know that you should eat what sounds right to your body, But if you've been given sugar and ultra processed food, the Doritos and the Twinkies and all these things, it's hard to push those aside and say, you know what, broccoli is what really my body's craving and wants right now. It's not these other things because of the way they've altered our neurochemistry and biology.
It's incredibly difficult. And it requires a lot of creativity. It requires a lot of patience. It requires a lot of support. And some days I feel like I have the answer. Some days I feel really lost and that I can't figure it out. But what I do know is that two things, and I guess if we would only take away these two things from this whole experience, and that would probably be enough, which is number one, you can make the choice to do the work to get in touch with those things. Now, I'm not a nutritionist, so I can't speak to sugar, but I could. I've done a lot of coaching around sugar with my clients. I'm a somatic trauma therapist, meaning I know how to help people, and my book teaches how to help people untangle the fear that your people pleaser has around, well, not yours, but theirs, or around if they say no, well, how will that work? What will happen? People still need to laugh. All of those thoughts that you're having right now. Yeah. And underneath that, what if it was okay? What if that thought that you're having is an understandable, let's just say, resistance, but it doesn't actually mean that it won't be okay? Or if you were to slow down, or if you would be okay with like slow growth instead of fast growth, or a really high income instead of the highest income, it would still be okay. So we have to untangle that. And that's a lot of sitting with the body, sitting with our feelings. What do I feel that? What emotion does that? Where does that come from? Is that mine? Is that truly what I believe? It's a lot of that. And then you have to actually get really creative because the rest of the world is not doing it and is not set up yet or always to support. And I don't know if it's ever going to be.
I guess it starts with like reverse engineering. What is the outcome that I really want here? Because if my desire is to have the most money, the most like social status, the most flashy things, whatever it is, I'm not going to inherently settle for anything less than that. And I'm going to jack up my nervous system in pursuit of that. But if I'm okay with like perhaps happiness is a higher value to me, or like quality social time or whatever, then I can realize that perhaps it's okay if I have a little less of the financial success or business success or whatever other kind of success to accommodate like the other higher priority.
In this context, when you say jack up your nervous system, what do you mean?
Well, if I want to be the very top of something, it's going to require a lot of pushing. It's recovery too, but like I'm not going to necessarily want to spend as much time going inward and being okay with having a little less. And instead, I'm going to want to do everything I can to chase forward and pursue that, which won't necessarily be in service of my happiness per se, or at least my longer term happiness, but it'll be in service of like the ultimate goal that I have.
But then you're equating having that with needing to push forward to have it. And we're not saying that being okay with less doesn't equal not pursuing the goal. Nobody's letting go of the goal. It's how do I go about the goal? When we go forward and we untangle and we are okay with less, now what we've created is equanimity and calm thought. I'm no longer, and no parts of me are unconsciously, sneakily attached to this goal. So when I show up, not only am I the most well-rested person in the room, I'm the one who is thinking the most clear and the most creative, which tells me I'm going to get the most out of that conversation.
Okay, so what I think I'm understanding is that by doing some of the inner work and untangling things going on in my subconscious, Then when I go forward and I go into a conversation, to a meeting, whatever it is, then I have more clarity and less like subconscious things pulling me in different directions.
Exactly. It takes an incredible amount of energy to be in a stress response, and it takes a lot of your brain's energy away from the parts of your brain that are innovative, that help build trust with other people. And so when we have these quite ambitious goals, and when we're doing anything that is new that requires more capacity of us, one way to increase our nervous system capacity for that goal is to get rid of all of the stuff, all of the fears that you're holding that cloud your judgment, or that people can feel in you. They're like, oh, why are they so attached to this? Why do they care so much about this? Or, that guy's really nervous. I'm going to take advantage of that. Like, they really seem to care. Or, I don't know, something feels off. They're attaching their ego to this. I spent a lot of time in the startup community here in Melbourne. And so I speak with a lot of VC investors. And we speak a lot, or we have been speaking a lot, about the presence of the founder's ego. And how it's interesting because a lot of people who apply for funding are these, people with really big egos. And I would put myself in that category sometimes. And the VCs have kind of said to me, like, it's funny because it's an interesting balance. You need that healthy ego, but when it's related to pushing, improving, and moving forward, you know that they're not going to be a good founder. I do consulting and support for a VC firm because a lot of their founders have too many emotional ups and downs because they're just too attached because of all of that stuff. I've got to prove this is what my dad thought. This is what makes me successful. If I don't have that money, then I'm gonna, and it becomes a lot.
It's kind of a paradox. When you have too much ego, then it can detract from your mission as a founder. But if you don't have enough, obviously, then you're not going to be a good founder because you're also not invested in your mission and you're not emotionally as present as you would be if you had more of an ego. So again, it seems like the strategy there is to go inside, figure out what all the strings are attached to, where they're pulling you in different directions. Once you get clear on that and you untangle some of them, then you can move forward with a healthy level of ego.
100%. And it's interesting because I think a lot of us who have a goal, we actually hook on to that goal from a place of fear or wanting to change something. We're angry about something, or we want to make sure something else doesn't happen. A lot of people are like, I grew up really poor, so I want to make sure that I have money, or I got really sick, and so I want to make sure that I never have to work at an office again, or I saw this really awful thing happen to people who are important to me. I want to make sure that I build a company that makes sure that doesn't happen. And that's really helpful. And I'm beginning to develop this theory. I'm actually curious, Nick, what you would say. I think sometimes we have to latch on to that, go for it, and then step back and release all of it, and then hook right back on, and you have more clarity, you have more energy, and you have more momentum because you're doing it now from a healthy place. But the goal doesn't really need to change. You're just going to be a healthier person moving forward.
And that sounds all well and good, but it requires a bit of a trust fall, because to be actively pursuing it and then just to stop and get a higher vantage on the goal and where you're going, you have to be relatively confident and sure that by taking the foot off the gas and stepping back, that you're not going to be going off track and getting behind.
And that's a really common fear. If I do this, will I fall behind? I've never worked with a client where it's felt like a trust fall, because we work with those voices to make sure that it doesn't. So, okay, well, what do you need? What do you need to make sure that it doesn't feel like you're getting behind? And also, I think that where I come in, the trust fall is is saying yes to working with me. It's like, I don't know what I'm going to find, but I'm just going to sign this contract and send you this money and we're going to do it. And then, yeah, in some ways it does. And in some ways we have to just come to that place where we're like, what am I willing to do?
What are some of the common themes or things that come up? Of course, there'll be like the parental influence of like, I need to succeed because my dad or mom or whatever said that it's important to be like financially independent, whatever. I want the social prestige of like having a successful exit. What are the common themes that you see repeatedly coming up across your clients?
Big one is I need to prove that I'm smart or I'm like something enough. There's a lot around trying to avoid existential uncertainty and pain, especially with people who are really purpose driven. I want to help the environment in this way. I want to help underprivileged people in this way. And a lot of it, we have to sit with that really uncomfortable sense of the world is really unfair and we actually don't know what will happen. And it's really hard. We have to find ways to navigate that don't include overworking or beating themselves up or whatever it is. So we've got, I want to prove it to my parents, existential grief in a way around the lack of support in the world.
Clients who are coming to you, I'm going to assume they're not aware that this is going on in the background. Hence, they're coming to you and you're helping them figure these things out. And then how is it that you're arriving at that destination of them understanding, oh, I'm actually chasing this so hard and not willing to let go or at least take a step back and examine where I'm going because of uncertainty and because of like lack of confidence or whatever it is?
We use somatic practices. I have a practice that I share and we use our curiosity and it's very client led. Like they will know more about what's happening and what inside of their body. The first thing we do is we increase their capacity to feel what's happening in their body. Okay, so I have a sensation in here, I have an emotion in here, we get language, we increase that introspection. Then we develop the capacity to be curious about what it means, which means not taking that feeling of like, my body kind of leaned forward and it felt really excited when I saw that email versus my body leaned back and I felt like, and there's like this thing in my stomach when I saw that other email. And we say, okay, cool. We develop a lot of curiosity and the skill of being curious and non-judgmental towards those so that then by the end they can walk away and they can be really aware of what's going on in their body and they have the ability to track back. Oh, okay. So when I felt that thing in my belly, it was saying no, but what I'm actually really afraid of, when I traced that back and I got down to the emotion and I kind of got a felt sense and I kind of had a dialogue with it. What I'm actually afraid of is success. That's the third one. Everyone is afraid of success. We are afraid of being seen. We are afraid of being judged. We are afraid that our partner won't love us if we make more money than them. We are afraid that we will outgrow our friends. We are afraid that we'll become somebody that we don't want or something, that it will all fall away.
I think that I agree with you. That is a common thing that comes up. But then the ego also tells us that's not the case, or something in us tells us that, no, not for us. Like, we're not afraid of succeeding. How do you peel back the layers there to figure out if this is an actual persistent like inner conflict, inner tension between I don't know if it's your ego or what it is that's telling you that it's totally fine and it's not an issue versus like your subconscious, which is processing it as a core issue?
Yeah. So what you're talking about is when you kind of have those two conflicting voices inside and when you're like, oh, I'm a little bit concerned about this. And another voice is like, logically, these are reasons why that does not make any sense. Yeah. We get past that. So that's like what I would call part to part conflict. It's really helpful short term. It's really exhausting long term. You can't out logic all of that stuff. So we say, okay, cool. Yep. You're completely right. Sure. And let's go deeper into the part that keeps bringing up this concern and understand why it keeps bringing it up so that we can stop bringing it up. And if there is something that we really need to know, we will uncover it and we will make an action plan to move forward. Or we will give that energy in your system a better thing to do that is not false alarm.
I think part of it also is that some component of the body and the nervous system will tell us that, no, this isn't an issue. This over here is not an issue. There really are no issues currently. Everything is great, except for some reason things aren't working out the way they should be. How do you like figure out, I mean, you mentioned that you take clients through a process to like tune into sensations in their body, in their stomach, different parts of their body when they're doing things and they're reading emails. How do you continue to like probe and go deeper to see what these are? Because I can imagine like throughout the day, there's all kinds of emails, messages, meetings, calls that happen. And like each of those is going to bring us one direction or another in business or outside of business. And I guess if we keep an awareness, I mean, like maybe log down the different events that happen and the plus or minus in terms of like how we feel as a result. If like, are we tensing our muscles or are we totally relaxed and feeling a little more joy? Is there a best practice around how to actually implement this into our routine to figure out what these might be?
You can use this, what I'm about to share, to help you log and really say to your body, okay, like everything is totally fine, we're good. And also figure out what you actually want to give your attention to. To go inside and do inquiry is fun for some people. It's a really good way to procrastinate, and it's absolutely essential as well in other ways. But the thing is, like you said, we can't process everything. That's not a waste of time, but it's a waste of time. You're going to ask yourself, what am I aware of 3 times a day? And you're going to notice one sensation, one thought process. When I say thought process, I mean you're going to make a topic sentence that says, I'm having thoughts about chicken dinner. Like it's not, I'm having, it's one sentence. I'm having thoughts about, you're not going to go into those thoughts. So one sensation, okay. Get more curious about, I can feel my legs on my seat, or I can feel my headphones. I can feel kind of a sensation in my belly that's kind of like hunger, but it's not hunger because I just ate. Oh, okay, interesting. Like that type of thing. One sensation, one thought, one emotion. And then sometimes, depending on what's going on, you might find stillness. If you find stillness, you probably don't have thoughts and emotions and sensations. And just write them down 3 times a day at minimum, and then begin to see what keeps reoccurring. And I have a list of sensations and a list of emotions in my book. And so you can have that graph next to you to kind of pick them out. There are heaps of them on the internet as well. You can get them for free. Just say, okay, what is reoccurring? There are apps that do this. There's a feeling app that does this. It's really great as well. Like it's in everything. And then for those of us who have experienced pain and difficulty in the past, this helps because it can help you look at it and say, okay, that's on paper. I've written it down. It's really helpful to use your hand. Okay. Yep. No, things are okay. There's something weird going on. There might be a part of me that's worried that now because I have more money, it's going to be like my uncle who had money and then went bankrupt. But okay, it looks okay. And we can just keep reminding ourselves that, and that actually is a practice that at some point will settle and is essential. You got to be careful around that and do it softly and carefully, not logically and hard. And that can be a skill that we need to develop if we don't already have it. It's not logic and forcing. It's like gloving and care and like, okay, which can be uncomfortable sometimes. And then also what you do when you have that list is at the end of the week, if you notice, oh, I had this weird thing in my back keep occurring, or I was noticing that I was tense in my jaw, or I was irritable this week. I kept being irritable. That's the point when you go back and you say, okay, well, there's something there. Let's just have a look at it. There are advanced practices for us to start.
Yeah, I did a version of this a couple of years ago because I was in a boat where I felt like I couldn't actually feel the way I wanted to, and I wasn't getting the cues, but I'm sure my body was giving me. So every 20 minutes for a week, I had an alarm on my phone, And it would remind me to stop and check in. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what am I wanting? And by the end of like the second day, I'm like, oh, okay, I can all of a sudden do this. And it got easier and easier. But to me, setting an alarm was a really good way of making it a habit so that I did it. And to this day, I don't do it as much anymore because that's way too intensive. But I still have 2 alarms a day to check in and do that same thing and figure out what's going on internally and matching that to the external events.
Yeah, I love that you chose to go with what am I wanting? What did you learn from asking yourself that question?
Sometimes it would vary. I mean, depends on the time frame I was doing. When I was doing it for every 20 minutes, sometimes it would be the same for like an hour or 2 straight. And then sometimes it would just vary dramatically. It'd be like this for this 20-minute block and then this for another 20-minute block. And it would just keep changing over and over again. But I found a lot of times it was like relaxation or downtime, and my mind was telling me to keep working and to put out more. And by like putting a pen to paper and jotting it down, I realized, oh, okay, I'm actually tired right now, and perhaps I'm better served from just relaxing for a few minutes or taking the next 20 minutes just to unwind.
Yeah. Do you find that often when you feel that inside and then you do take your time to unwind, that you're able to re-engage with work from a better place?
Even just a 20-minute break in the middle of the day, all of a sudden I come back to it and like I feel a lot more energized. I feel ready to go, and I'm certainly more productive.
Yeah, it's interesting how much our brain will fight to push through, and it's such a double-edged sword because that same quality is what can then support us, that helps us get to our goals. And it's a real balance, learning when to pause, when to go slow. Yeah.
Speaking of, in your book, you mentioned how to achieve your goals in record-breaking time, but with minimal effort. What is the approach to doing that?
You're freeing up your energy. There's an entire podcast that you have on time. Is it time management, or is it like the true wealth is energy? I think it is. And you're freeing up your energy. And the thing is, there are certain people in the world who are supposed to do certain things. And you know it, you feel it when they're doing that thing. When you're in that little groove, you're in that little flow, the world conspires. People want to help you. But you know what I'm talking about? That when there's science behind this, there's the happiness effect, for example. When you're happy doing what you love, you earn more, you are healthier, you have better relationships. When you have that level of magnetism about you, and that they're your true goals. And so that's the other thing. You can lock on to the goal, but also some people will learn, oh, no, that really wasn't my goal. We hear this all the time. I became a doctor because that's what mom and dad told me to do. And then I left and I decided to do something else. And what is your true goal? You'll get there. You'll know how to get there. Your intuition will help you. Your body will help you. That happiness that you experience, that humility that you experience, people will flock to you and get to you. You've got to make sure it's your goal though.
So after you figure out, I guess if you're on your current path or someone's on their current path, how do they make sure they're going at least towards taking steps in the right direction, their goal, their ultimate goal?
Well, you have to know what you want to begin with, like you started realizing or started practicing. So
when you say want, are you talking about like overall life vision, or are you talking about on like a more micro zoomed in level?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. Some people work really well when they have an overall life vision, or some people work really well when they're like, I just need to focus on my values. My values will orient me, or my felt sense of how I feel. If it's a yes, it's a yes, So you got to know what you want. Do you want to be vision oriented? Do you want to be values oriented? Do you want to just focus on the next quarter, and you have that goal for your next quarter? So if you can just say, what do I want? And sometimes we have to unpack shame and guilt around that. Sometimes we feel like we should want something. Sometimes we feel like what we want is too much. Sometimes it's too ambitious. Sometimes it's not big enough. Sometimes it's the version of ourselves 5 years ago would be embarrassed and annoyed at the fact that we're choosing these goals today. Sometimes they're goals that we didn't expect. And so we have to process and be with that guilt and that shame without deflecting it onto other people or collapsing into it ourselves and becoming lethargic and going into a nervous system collapse where we're not moving forward. And so get really clear on what you want. And then more importantly, get really clear on why. This is not a new philosophy that I'm sharing.
Yeah. So if we feel guilty that the goal is too big or shame that the goal is too small, for example, what do we do with that information and that feeling to transmute it into something that's actually uplifting for our body and nervous system?
Yeah, this one's really important because shame is one of the only emotions that is socialized, meaning in all of the studies that we've looked at over emotions, there's not a lot of conclusive evidence that says that all humans in all cultures have shame as a part of what they bring into the world. Shame is really helpful in society because it does keep us in some ways kind of well behaving. There are certain activities that we shame that shouldn't be done, and that is okay. And then there are certain activities that we shame that one can kind of look at and say, well, was that really hurting anybody? Such as having a really ambitious goal. But what happens with shame, because it's the emotion that is most threatening to the nervous system, because it's saying you may be kicked out of this tribe, we have to be really careful about how we engage with it. And so what me and my clients do is increase our capacity for shame. Shame is healed when you share it with somebody. So there's some community, kind of you say, okay, you're vulnerable and you share something. Or when you have compassion, or when you build in other experiences such as pride and celebration, and you can recognize yourself. I'm ashamed of this, but I'm really proud of myself for this. And so you kind of counterbalance. What we want to not do is go into the story that it has. And like all those voices, don't even go into that like logic back and forth. It's not that bad because this other person is doing that. So that means like, don't even go into that dialogue. What you want to learn to do is remove yourself from it and observe it. Okay. Shame, but got a bit of shame, got a bit of guilt. How interesting, how curious. I wonder what that's telling me. And usually it's one or two things. Am I in some way betraying my own values? So is there some type of cognitive dissonance and that's why this feels off? And do I need to figure out a way to make that make sense or change some of my behaviors? Or am I betraying the values and expectations of someone else? And in that case, do I want to? Do I care enough about what that person might do or think?
I think it's David Hawkins. He mentions that a feeling will only last about 90 seconds, even the most intense feelings, unless we re-energize it by building a story and repeating that story back. So if we actually just let ourselves sit with a feeling, it'll pass through pretty quickly, but it's the story we build around the feeling and the emotion that end up making it persist and last and last and last.
Yeah, I find that to be true for feelings that are not coming from a hyper vigilant or hyperactive nervous system. So when they're just a response, like I'm going to use the email example. An email, it tells me that I didn't get into this program that I wanted to get in. I'm sad and disappointed and maybe a bit angry. If I sit with those feelings and I'm actually really with them, and I'm not in the story, but I'm paying attention to the sensations. Okay, there's this like vibration in my chest and there's this thing in my belly and I can feel it in my back. If I'm really with them, it will pass. The feelings that don't pass, though, like you've had that, haven't you? Where there's a feeling that just doesn't pass. And you're like, I thought I was sitting with that. I went to the sauna and I those are usually signs that they're coming from a part of us that was hurt in a past experience and is now carrying this story, and it's almost saying, hey, like, make sure you pay attention to this, or like, I haven't been resolved. I haven't been fully seen. Because what we're talking about is when you fully see it. You know that feeling when you feel like, oh yeah, like they totally understood. It's that emotion that dissipates, not all the surface level ones.
And then how do you go about creating that? Like, do you just share that with someone who's capable of processing and like sitting in it with you, such as a coach or a therapist or something? Or can you do that work on your own to fully see it and validate it and then let that part heal?
Both. It's a skill. Yeah, I'm happy to answer, but I'm curious what you would say based off of your experience witnessing yourself and others.
For me, I've gotten to the point where I can do that. I'm not sure I'm as effective as I am when I am with someone who's also skilled in this, and we can both like sit with that, and they can give me reflections that I don't necessarily notice on my own, and it can feel like, oh, I'm actually very understood here because they're giving me reflections that I couldn't even see. But I certainly have like developed the ability to partially, at least, do that for myself.
Yeah, and I think most of us have the goal, and I have the goal from all of my clients, that you can do that for yourself. You're an adult and you want to be able to hold and have the capacity for your own experiences, because you want to be independent. You want to be able to have clear thinking. You can. It's not a big deal. You learn the skill, and some people do that through meditation. Some people do that through sport. Just that skill of holding sensation in the body. You know, okay, so my muscles are burning. I'm not going to freak my whole body. I'm not going to freak out about it, but you can transfer that skill from being, like, for example, in the gym to an emotion by just observing with non-judgmental awareness. I think there are different aspects of that skill that are helpful for different people. And some people need to learn warmth. So let's just say, I don't know, for some reason, we haven't learned a lot of warmth in our life. We don't know how to speak to ourselves warmly. Our parents didn't speak to ourselves very warmly. Our society, the culture that we brought up in, it's kind of direct. Like, what we actually need to learn is the ability to speak very lovingly in our own way to ourselves. We never modeled that. Or what we need to learn is to not go into all of our thoughts and impulses. So we might have to figure out that skill. Or maybe what we need to learn is curiosity and ability to ask questions. And, oh, do you reckon that comes from here? Do you reckon that could be that? Do you reckon? Or, and this will happen a lot with my clients, we need to learn how to validate our emotions. Just that Brene Brown, all of her work is around this. Just, I can see that is painful. Just, yes. And it makes sense that is painful. Without jumping to the logic, the planning, the figuring out, the solution, like without jumping into solution mode. That combination of skills, when we combine them, we have the capacity to move through things really quickly, become more resilient. And sometimes it's helpful to have somebody teach them for you. It's the same thing as having a coach with anything else. You're going to get better at it quicker if you have one-on-one support. Yeah. And also, there are certain things in life that you're not supposed to hold by yourself. So your nervous system has something called neuroception, and it can sense when there's other people around that are safe, that if something were to happen, if there was an emotion or an experience that was too big for me to hold, the other person would help me. And when there are certain things, shame is one of them, or certain emotions maybe that have been in the body for a really long time, and so they've kind of become bigger over time. They've just, like, little things have happened. They've just kind of, you've never looked at this, I don't know, anger that you have about your mother. So it's just sitting there. And if you try to go into it, all of your protective mechanisms are going to increase. You're going to want to crave a bottle of wine. You're going to want to look at your emails. You're going to want to fall asleep. You're going to feel really irritated. You're going to start thinking about that person at work who shouldn't have put the coffee in that way. I don't know. All of your protective mechanisms will exacerbate because they're they don't trust you to be with that level of emotion, especially if you don't do a lot of this work really, really regularly. Your body doesn't, your psyche doesn't, it's not able to say, yeah, this guy knows what they're doing. So sometimes it will need another nervous system just to give your body that felt sense of, all right, we can look at this because it's really big and I've never really looked at it. And I was kind of hoping that if I just ignored it, it would go away. But it hasn't gone away, but I guess we can get curious about it. Or some things are really sad and they need another person just to be with that sadness or that pain. And that's not a design flaw. That's part of human nature, right? And community. Like, haven't you experienced that realization of we're supposed to do this with other people?
One of the things I discovered too is that if I react to something in a way that's not objectively heightened, like if someone was to listen into that and they knew me, they'd be like, oh, why did you raise your voice? Why did you get harsher, more snappy in your response there? It's usually because there's something below the surface that I can look at, and by examining, I can like dissipate that charge. Because it's not like, a lot of times if someone else was in that situation, they would respond very differently than I did. But like in everyday situations, I get cut off in traffic. I mean, a lot of different things come up and I'm able to like dig into it, and like, it's like almost like a mirror, and it's like uncomfortable. It's like, oh yeah, everyone would react like I did. But then you look around and you hear other people in the same situation and they don't. And you're like, oh, okay. That means it's not the other person here. It's something going on internally in me, and I have the power to go in and dissipate this charge.
Is there something that you have noticed has been helpful for you, or that you would recommend to other people to be able to have that level of self-reflection? Because it requires a healthy level of humility as well.
Yeah. Well, it's something I realized, like I noticed in myself that I do this, I get more snappy than objectively makes sense, given like the really minute nature of a lot of the things that go on. And because of that, I'm like, well, there's something here. I can pretend like it's other people, or I can recognize that I'm the one who's reacting this way. I don't need to necessarily tell them. I could tell them and be like, oh, that was uncool. Like I shouldn't have done that. And I often now gravitate towards that. But at the same time, I can just like highlight it. I can bookmark that and come back to it later. But I just notice like when my tone of voice changes, I get louder, things like that, that people might not even notice if they don't know me really well, but I notice. And I guess because I've done this enough times, I'm more aware of it and I can go back to it and work on it later.
And what helps you when you do go back to it and work on it later? Like, what's your process? If I start with sensations in the body and then go, oh, where did that come from? And what does that mean? How do we, like, what's your process?
Yeah, so I'll sit down, I'll close my eyes, I'll conjure up the situation. I'll think about, like, first objectively, like what it was that just happened. Like, oh, I was talking to this person and they gave me this look, or they said this, or they did that thing. And then I'll recreate in my mind what I did in response. Like my volume was louder, or my tone of voice changed. I was more snappy. Okay. And then I'll think like, okay, where did this come from previously? If I trace this back, like where can I find the earliest time I can remember in which this came up? And what was I looking for in that situation that I didn't get and I got something else instead? And oftentimes it traces back to like very early on in life. And by bringing awareness to it alone, I'm not going to say it always just goes away, but like that younger version of myself feels seen, and I feel less reactive. I increase the wedge between the stimulus of someone doing something or saying something and my instant reactivity, so that I can actually pause for a second. Like, wow, I feel like reactive or activated right now. Give me a second to actually respond the way I want to, and then I can communicate more clearly in the way that I want to and change the pattern going forward.
Yeah, I think we can add that skill. Like it's a skill that you've developed to be able to objectively compare your response versus this scenario that I don't think maybe a lot of people listening, because you probably tend to attract the same type of person, the same mindset, but not necessarily everyone has. A lot of people will not be able to see. It doesn't really occur. They know that there's something. And so I would be that person. I'm like, oh, I can feel that there's something not off. And I'll go in and I'll do the same, very similar practice. And then I'll be like, oh, yep, I handled. Now I have the capacity to objectively reflect and be like, that was not cool. But your ability to begin objectively is also a really, really, really wonderful skill. And I'm guessing it also has a lot to do with the fact that you're very logic. Like logic is the way that you understand the world and like makes sense. So when you're doing that type of work, like once, I don't know, I'm going to tell me if I'm making a correct yes. You would have found yourself at times in like repetitive stuff. You're like, this doesn't make sense. Why am I in these thought patterns or something? And as soon as you see the logic, or as soon as you understand the logic of whatever the problem is or something, like you're good, you move forward. Like that, it's like you're done. Like you're like, okay, cool. It's never going to be a problem ever again because now the logic makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think part of what helped me with this, because this wasn't something I could do until about 2 years ago, was doing that exercise where I checked in with myself frequently. And then I could start to notice like, oh, as I've said now multiple times, my volume went up. Why did that just happen? And then like being able to understand when I'm deviating from my baseline state. And some people around me do notice when that happens, and they were even able to reflect back to me like, hey, sounds like you just got upset or triggered about this. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right, I did. And then I can actually process it on my own.
Yeah. So what helped you commit to doing it every 20 minutes? I actually began coaching recommending that because that's what I had the space for at the time. And I noticed that a lot of people would give me a really hard no. And so I decreased it to minimum 3 times a day and then as much as you want. What helped you commit to every 20 minutes?
I watched a YouTube video on it because I learned from a teacher named Dr. Robert McDonald and his ultimate communication skills class. And he mentioned he called me out basically in front of the class and told me that I didn't seem to be very in touch with myself. And he said it in a nicer way. But then I was like, oh, okay, I'm taking this on as a challenge. And if the person in the YouTube video recommends every 20 minutes, I'll do that. And I think after a couple of days, I decreased it to like every 30 or 40 minutes or something. But either way, it was a challenge at first. But then after I started being able to actually notice a difference, I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep this up. And then I did it for a week, maybe 2 weeks. And then I backed it way down because I got that ability. But it's like learning a skill. When I pick up a new skill, I want to actually like make sure I get enough reps at the skill so that it sticks with me. And if I can do it faster and get the skill quicker, then I want that.
And it's ingrained now. You're doing it more times every single day than you probably realize.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have like the overt cues twice per day, but I'm doing it regularly. And even on this call, if I was to like all of a sudden get triggered and it was to come out in my voice right now, I would notice it and I probably would bring it up, but like it's part of my day now. Like I notice it all the time when I check emails, like, oh, this doesn't feel good. Let me minimize like engagements with this party that I'm interacting with.
Yeah. And as a result of that, what are some of the effects? What I'm thinking of is the same thing that you've been thinking as you've been speaking to me, which is I could already hear everybody's objection and all of the parts of them saying like, it's not really worth my time. Like, okay, cool, cute skill, love this skill. But is this if I have to focus on 3 things for the next 3 months, like, is this the skill that I'm going to put my energy into? And I personally want to advocate for, yes, it should be the skill that you put your energy into. Do you agree with me and why?
Yeah, I think it's a really important skill because it carries over to everything and like not just at work, but also in any other personal relationships. Speaking personally, I noticed when it was going on internally when I had these fluctuations, but then I could also more easily see it in other people that I interact with and engage with. And then I can actually be like that support to them, which enriches our relationship. And my mom once told me that like life is about relationships and like it's a very important part. And I always said, yeah, like that's for you, but not so much for me. And then I realized like relationships really are quite important to me and like all types of relationships. And it makes life just feel a lot richer. Plus it carries over to business world and other worlds, like the sports world, all worlds?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is something that everyone goes through, but I've also come to that conclusion more. I thought it was, this like cute little, oh yeah, like it's all about relationships. Like, no, it actually 100% is about relationships. And some people will say, oh yeah, it's about like networking. It's like, it's about your ability. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, networking is a part of relationships, but to me, networking implies it doesn't have to be this way, but like very loose acquaintances. And to me, like life is richer when you have deeper relationships. And a really effective way of getting there is being able to like recognize patterns in yourself and in others.
From my perspective, if I'm thinking about, what makes a person feel safe, I don't know about you, but I feel safer with people who are just themselves and who have self-awareness and are not trying to, and also who are self-reflective. You know that if I say something to this person, I'm like, hey, didn't love how you handled that. They're going to be like, okay, I don't need them to change necessarily or apologize or anything, but I feel better in relation to people who I know I can
Bring things up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's like trust.
And it's also like depth of relationships is like a commonality between the blue zones. It was in a book of like what is it called? Like the 5 regrets of the dying or something. I'm butchering the title, but like it's a commonality between like for so many different purposes, like longevity and performance and life satisfaction, pretty much everything.
Yeah. I watched The Blue Zone on Netflix, and that was the takeaway that I got. It wasn't about what you were eating. It was that you were eating, how you were eating and your relationship. That was important. That is important. But it's more about, is that the takeaway that you got? Maybe you can enlighten me.
Yeah, everyone focuses on like, what is the blue zone diet? And it's like, oh, you're missing the point. Like, it's not about the exact foods they're eating. I mean, even on the food front itself, it's like the way it's grown matters, and like the lack of chemicals and like pesticides and things like that. And like the relationship they had with the land. And then of course that's just on the food side, but then it's also like the way it's enjoyed, like this state they live in, like a much lower stress state on average, the community. There's probably all kinds of other factors that were not actually included in those analyses to begin with. But I think like the world latches on to what specific foods they ate. And to me, that's like a part, but it's a small part of like the overall picture.
Yeah. And then I think it also comes back to that thing of like trying to hack something and trying to take the essence out of something, which is what we've kind of tried to do by figuring out like the olive oil and it's like you're trying to hack like the way to your goals. Yeah, you have to do the reps, and you do want to be with people who you can share your dreams with. You want to have like the dreams that are the correct amount of ambitious for you so that you feel passion and you can feel pulled towards it. But I think the bigger thing that we want is community. I find sometimes with clients, some things that are brought forward, the only response that I have is like, we need to get you some really good friends. We need to figure out how to get you some really good friends, because there's certain things that you can go over and over in therapy or in coaching, or you can learn about them in yourselves. But until you have a felt like shared experience with somebody, it's empty. Have you felt that?
And I think there's a lot of power also in like the groups that aren't just going to like always validate everything you say, but it's like they're going to recognize where you are. And then also like when you build stories around certain things, like, oh, this person said this because they don't like me or whatever, they push back and they don't just accept that that's the case. It's like, I get why you think that. And at the same time, perhaps they were having a bad day and they didn't even notice you there or something.
Yeah, which is more than often the case. But that's also a type of individual, because you would have noticed this. There are certain people who are oriented towards growth and who value growth. And then there are people who are not. And I don't know, I've noticed in myself, my friends, my clients in the world, that at some point when you choose growth, it's actually quite painful to notice the people in your life who do not.
I hadn't thought about that, but now that you pointed out, like, that's a very succinct way of explaining it. Yeah. Well, Sheridan, I think we've covered some of like the big boulders, the cornerstones of nervous system regulation in this, and like somatics and aligning with your body, your biology and everything. Are there any quick tips or like biohacks or things that are going to get people quicker wins to like help regulate their nervous systems, especially if they're already in like a agitated state?
Yeah, regulate your nervous system, but whatever, that's really buzzword now. But also actually do it. There's a PDF and I'll share it with you. Actually, I already shared it with you. Nervous system PDF for regulation when you do not have a lot of privacy, you do not have a lot of time, and you do not have a lot of space. It is a list of over 100 ways to bring regulation through what your specific pattern is. You might already know it. Nick, you're a fighter. We can tell that by what you already have shared with us, so that we can see it in all of your traits. When you get agitated, you push and you want to go forward. Some people get lethargic, have apathy. Some people get anxious and like want to run away from the situation and avoid it. Inside of that PDF, you'll find ways to identify your tendency and then ways to regulate. You don't have to download my PDF. You can use 1,000 resources all over the internet. I like mine because it's got unconventional ways that are really accessible when you can't go do a yoga practice or do a breath work, or you don't want to use those things. And it teaches you why these things work. So you can be like, oh, okay, that's working because it's engaging my muscles. I don't want to go to the gym right now, but I can go like shovel snow or something. So you can kind of play with it a little bit more. Very simply learn what are the small little insidious signs that I'm getting dysregulated, raising my voice, feeling agitated, wanting sugar maybe. And then how do I bring myself back to a baseline? That's the number one place to start that everybody needs to master before they can move on to anything else.
Nice. I love that. And also the case against just doing the quick fixes and the hacks and everything is like, okay, yes, you're addressing them, but the deviation still is there to begin with. And what if the deviation didn't happen in the first place and your body didn't need to mobilize the resources, waste the energy to crank out stress hormones and to prepare yourself to fight? If you were able to fix that trigger, that pattern, then you stay steady and your body is better resourced, and that those resources can go elsewhere to detoxify you, to create energy, to help your thinking, and all kinds of other important things. So yes to both. Add the quick fixes and then also use that opportunity to go deeper and fix the roots that are dysregulating you to begin with.
Especially if you're exhausted and you're like, I've done this before. Okay, you need the next stage. We speak about it in my book. It's pillar 2. It's like exhausting to always be regulating. So also engage in those deeper practices.
Well, Sheridan, if people want to connect with you, if they want to grab Somatic Intelligence for Success, your book, how do they go about that? Where do they find you and where do they grab your book?
You can put it in Amazon, so you can just get it off of Amazon. You can type in Somatic Intelligence for Success, or you can write Sheridan Ruth, that's SHERIDANRUTH. Pop that into Google, pop that into Amazon. You will find me. There's only one of me.
Perfect. And can they work with you from that page as well?
Yeah, so you'll find we have coaching options. There's a 90-minute option. Sometimes there are group options, and then there's packages to go in and do these sessions.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It's been a blast chatting all things about nervous system and regulation and somatic intelligence.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to High Performance Longevity. If you got value today, the best way to support the show is to leave a review or share it with someone who's ready to upgrade their health span. You can find all the episodes, show notes, and resources mentioned at outlier.com. Until next time, stay energized, stay bioharmonized, and be an outlier.